This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is March 26, 2026.
I'm Scott de Lundeboom.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, who's up, who's down, and who's out of the BC Conservatives? Carney introduces the Strong and Free Elections Act, and the Auditor General does their thing and tells us what's wrong with the federal government. Support this show at patreon.com/politicos. Let's jump into this Main Street poll we have for the BC Conservative leadership race. Leadership races are hard to poll. Main Street claims to have found 2,578 people who are either currently registered BC Conservatives or intend to sign up by the deadline, according to them. I don't believe that off the start. I like that Main Street tries to do hard polling, but I don't feel like they've ever convinced me they do it well. Like, the overall numbers are usually fine, but like this kind of stuff, or like when they do a constituency poll or local elections, it's usually a shot in the dark, but it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, I've seen some real misses on both of those. It's just hard to do, particularly for membership ones where, you can't target a geographic area. It's entirely, how good is the data of the list they're using to get the membership, or is it, if it's entirely self-report, how reliable is that? And if it is self-report, how many calls did they actually have to make to do the whole thing? Because there aren't that many members of any political party in BC, so trying random dialing is going to be a huge pain on that.
Nevertheless, the results they get aren't unbelievable. They're actually pretty on vibe. Caroline Elliott leads with 21.2% saying they'd rank her first, 20.8% say Peter Millibar, which is easily within the margin of error. The next tier is Ian Black at 8.4%, Carolyn Findlay at 8.1%, and Yuri Fulmer at 5.4%, Daryl Jones at 3.9%, and Warren Ham way back at 0.6%. And the absolute winner is undecided at 31.6%.
Feels real bad for Yuri Fulmer, because I think he's one of the people out there probably making the most noise in the leadership race. You don't hear a huge amount out of Ian Black.
No.
For example, and you get a decent amount from Yuri, but I guess it goes to show that social media posts aren't exactly the same as general engagement or support, even when they are getting a lot of likes, comments, and engagement, I guess is the word I'm looking for on that one.
Yeah, Black and Findlay have political experience, so they would have networks to either tap into or just some background level of awareness that I think is helping them. I'm actually surprised Daryl Jones isn't doing a little bit better. I've seen him higher in other polls, but this does feel like where he'll end up, kind of second from the bottom, or maybe third from the bottom. But the race shaping up between Caroline Elliott and Peter Millibar does seem like where it is probably headed. What's really interesting for this poll is they also asked people who is your second and third choice. And that gets a little bit tighter in the race. And they go through all of that and they actually do a full 5-ballot simulated result to say who would win today, which I haven't actually seen a pollster try to game out a ranked ballot election before. But in this case, they say it would take 6 ballots for Peter Millibar to win 50.5% to 49.5%. And I will say they did actually break down the regions because the Conservatives have a weighted constituency voting system. And so they tried to estimate that as well. So, like, methodologically, it's a clever poll.
Yeah, I just, at that point, you got to wonder how accurate that simulation is, because individually each choice makes sense, but you're compounding errors the more you do on it, because you only have so big a sample size, which might be fine for a province-wide poll, but then you start breaking it down by runoffs and second choices, and then try to distribute that regionally based on the point system. The fact that this basically comes down to Peter Millibar squeaking out a win by a single percentage point of 55.5 to 49.5 over Elliott, I wouldn't exactly take that to the bank, because those errors added up could easily push it the other way, or something weird happen and the knockoffs don't go in quite that order, or the distributions don't quite follow.
Just because their simulated result is a coin flip between the two frontrunners, where they could say, hey, we got it right either way, doesn't mean it's wrong, Scott. It's probably
doesn't
wrong,
mean
though.
it's right or
No.
either. So don't actually see them trying to estimate the error on that particular one there, but it'd be interesting to know.
Yeah. The other part that was interesting in here is they asked these respondents, what is the most important issue for you in this leadership race? And the leading issue for 34.2% was the cost of living and affordability, which isn't surprising. That's usually the issue on every political question. But second was, with 26%, land property rights and DRIPA. And then 15.2% said jobs in the economy. And then a bunch of other things.
I would be super curious if you had ran this poll a year ago, if that would have been anywhere near the same, or if this really changed quite significantly following the Cowichan decision, which is my hunch on this, but I don't think there's any polling to really back that up one way or the other.
No, I agree with you on vibes on that. I don't think it was a large topic of discussion a year ago, and it's been a drumbeat, especially for the Conservatives, for the past 8 months or whatever. So,
which also does point to the breakdown. So that one polls lower for the general public by a not insignificant amount.
Yeah. So, like I said, the poll itself, I don't trust the exact numbers, but the vibes aren't wrong on it, and I think it'll shape probably how I'm watching this race going forward, unless I see, I don't know, Daryl Jones picking up some big momentum or something else suggesting that this is wrong. But it does feel like the race between Peter Millibar as the inheritor of BC Liberal energy, but as a Conservative, versus Elliott as the new Conservative voice.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I mean, you might try and see, Black trying to squeeze out some of that, but that's going to be tough because he's running quite far behind, and that's a crowded lane at that point. But yeah, it does seem like Elliott kind of has the more conservative lane to herself on this one.
One of the challenges for whoever wins the BC Conservative leadership race is they have one fewer caucus member as of today, as they have kicked out MLA Han Chan from Richmond after it turned out he has been charged with assault and choking.
Yeah, so those are very serious allegations. Turns out the BC Prosecution Service appointed a special prosecutor all the way back in June of 2025, following the Starvin RCMP investigation, which is now just being officially announced to the public. Han Chan stepped down from caucus, so sitting as an independent. Apparently told the party of this yesterday, shortly before this all came out today on it. And statement from the interim leader is, we were unaware of this, but as soon as we found out, we ensured that he was no longer going to be a member of the party, at least until this matter is closed.
Yeah, the alleged incident took place in January 2024, months before the election. Doesn't mean it happened, innocent until proven guilty, but I'm curious about the timeline on the vetting, and if Halford is honest, and I guess Rustad before him, and Chan didn't disclose that he was under investigation at the time. Maybe he wasn't under investigation at the time. maybe there was nothing to disclose, and I don't know. It's
one
it's
thing
interesting, right?
One thing we saw in the lead up to the election was that being a small party that was experiencing rapid growth, the Conservatives didn't have a lot of resources for candidate vetting. It was a fairly consistent thing, and particularly in this case, the file is something that I've apparently learned today that's called a K file, which indicates that it's an alleged case of intimate partner or domestic violence, which probably means there's not like a lot of people involved outside of a very small number in this. So it's unlikely that this is the sort of thing a party would be able to turn up with, just a little more digging if the candidate wasn't honest about it.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think the Conservatives did the right thing in asking or Chan in kind of separating themselves in the interim. I think the question remains of whether he should resign as MLA, and I fucking don't know. I mean, probably, because these are serious charges and very serious charges. Even just to deal with them is going to require all of his attention, even if he's not guilty. But I don't know. It's a mess. It's ugly. This is dirt bad stuff.
Yeah, it's bad. There's a statement put out by his office that says he's contesting this and does not agree with the allegations. So, in that case, I could also see why, if he actually is innocent, would not want to resign over it. But yeah, typically how these have been done is in the past is that someone will at the very least step away from caucus, and kind of a lot more situation depending on whether or not they step down as an MLA. If he does step down, it's a riding that the Conservatives ought to feel pretty confident about keeping. They won it by a healthy margin in the last election, and ever since the Cowichan decision came down, I have a strong sense that has only improved their fortunes in the riding.
Yeah, indeed. So keep our eye on that as it works its way through the legal process. One of the other disputes that's much less... It's silly. It's a silly dispute. It's hard to transition this. But the Greens this week decided to hold Cabinet Minister Rick Lumak on feet to the fire for holding tech and AI stocks, which, Emily Lowen fired at him over in social media. And then the NDP decided to shoot back.
Indeed. So this week, Emily Lowen and the Greens dropped a video on social media basically accusing Lumak of conflict of interest. He's the AI minister, and he holds a fund that in turn holds AI stocks. On this, the whole thing's a little spurious, and I don't know, it's the kind of accusation and like mudslinging that doesn't make me think highly of the people making the accusations. Shallow, little populist. So in this case, according to his disclosure statement, he owns, among several other investments, which is a decently long list between him and his wife on all of this. Buried in there is something called Global Ets Artificial Intelligence and Technology ETF, ticker symbol AIQ. And in that, there is some NVIDIA, some Palantir, some Oracle, and a bunch of random other stuff. Like I pulled up what the actual holdings of it were, and you want to know what the largest one is?
Is it just like Microsoft or something boring?
No, it's some Korean semiconductor company that neither of us have heard of.
But is it evil, Scott?
I don't know, but it's only 4.1% of the thing. And disappointingly, the disclosure statements don't have a dollar value attached to any of this, but the report from CBC references a letter from the Conflict of Interest Commissioner that notes the $4,000 worth of shares he holds in this ETF is not likely to swing anything and is hardly sufficient to amount to a conflict of interest. And you do the math on what that $4,000 turns into for an individual company in there, and we're talking like $164 at the most. I don't think the Minister of AI is going to be making decisions over a $100 investment he has.
It's funny because I don't know, actually, I have a couple ETFs that are actually, I think, worth more than $4,000, not like huge ones or anything, but I couldn't name one or two stocks in there other than just pure guessing, because that's how ETFs work, is you put money in and you forget about it. That's the point of an ETF. I want someone else to trade my funds for me.
In this case, there are a bunch of sector-specific ones. So, you know, the ones I hold, for example, I'm guessing you probably do too, are stuff like the S&P 500 or TSX Composite, which are true index funds that are we're just going to invest in the whole stock market or the 500 largest companies or whatever that is. This one here is at least like sector-specific. He also has a 3D printing ETF and a clean energy ETF in there. He also apparently likes to trade a lot more than the other MLAs do, because these things get filed once a year. We're looking at the 2025 ones, but he put in 8 different material change notices on it too over the course of the year, which is more than anyone else in the legislature put in. The next most common was Sheldon Clare with 7 of them. So, maybe not the best thing that he's spending more of its time, buying and selling call options on things like Procter & Gamble and Google. But like fundamentally, the guy is not going to be changing policy based off a $4,000 investment. The whole thing is silly, particularly when it later turned out that you look at the Green Party's disclosure statements. Jeremy Valley-Rote owns an AI company stock. Just it's not buried in an ETF with 84 other investments in that. It's just direct shares in a privately held AI company, something called Sense AI, which I was unaware of before this. Googling it, it looks like a like brain games thing with AI slapped all over it. Which, a little sketchy.
Yeah, that one's weird because he's got a bunch of mutual funds and securities investments, as you'd expect, some, private residence and stuff like that. And then just, one stock or one
private business interest is that both him and his wife own. Interestingly, he also gets a top up from the Green Party. There's a Green Party BC stipend.
Is he House Leader? That's probably why.
Yeah.
Although that should come
that would be
a legislature as
probably a legislature one.
Oh well. That's their money to decide what to do with anyway. Disclosures are
just surprised they're paying it out because they don't have a huge amount of money, and the MLA salary is not nothing. Actually, Botterill doesn't have it, so it might be a party position thing.
It might have been because he was interim leader.
Oh yeah, that could be it.
That's where it's probably from. So disclosure statements are things you can spend a lot of time digging at, and I think they're a net positive, but they don't give us as much information as would be useful. Like they don't tell us how much on most of these, and I think some of that's hard to quantify because it can change rapidly. But
don't I know?
No numbers at all is also no numbers at all is also not helpful. So whatever, silly week here in BC politics for that.
The only other thing I will add to this is if the Green Party at least fashions itself as, the serious party that makes serious policy arguments, and this kind of slop populist, we're digging into things and trying to make a fake conflict of interest scandal out of nothing is not in keeping with how they think of themselves or the image they try and present. And it's going to be interesting to see if this is the start of a trend under the new leader, and we're going to see more of these kind of crappy mudslinging type attacks out of the Greens rather than the substantive retreats that they usually make.
I guess it depends how well it does and how effective it is. We weren't the target audience for this, social media was, and if it got the engagement, maybe that helps, unfortunately. Like, I think there can be a place for this kind of criticism. I think this was not it, clearly, but like, corruption is a thing that's happened and has been an issue, but this was, a whiff on very little smoke, if any, and you got to save that gun for when there is something real, or you kind of devalue the whole political system. Well, what the government is trying to do this week is bring forward the Heritage Conservation Act amendments, as they have announced how the consultations that they've been going through for months and years are doing. And they have some ideas on how to fix or improve things, make them a little less bad, so that, if you're doing a redevelopment of your property and you find something that's potentially archaeological, that you are not fucked, as some cases have been. And the result from the government is a little less permitting and a little faster. So hopefully it costs a little less.
Well, for some context,
the summary.
Yeah, for some context on this, the government had been working on the Heritage Conservation Act updates for a while now. There'd been a bunch of consultations in 2025 and I think 2024 on this, and it was going to be legislation that was introduced early this year, or might have even been end of 2025 on there, but they badly mishandled the actual consultations and rollout on there and drew a fair bit of blowback from when it did get pushed out. There were complaints from a lot of stakeholders, most notably that one that I remember is municipal governments. The people who were getting briefed directly on it had to sign NDAs. So you had things like where the city manager got a briefing on what was in there, but could not talk to the mayor and council about what the upcoming changes the government was going to introduce were. Anyway, when they finally got to the point of rolling out the legislation, bunch of backlash to it. There were questions about intangible heritage of one of the things that it was protecting, and just practically, what does it mean to protect something intangible? How do you have any certainty whether or not you're going to be covered by this if you try and do something? It was a mess. They ended up going back to the drawing board, or the consultation board in this case, and now they have put out this is what we're thinking about, and this is what we've been consulting on for a while, and we'll probably do the legislation later this year, fall of 2026.
And it's a situation where no one likes the status quo. Everyone agrees the act is bad and outdated and needs fixed.
Yeah.
We just
on how.
Oh, it just doesn't work for anyone. But yeah, there's lots of different problems with it that is harming lots of different interests, whether you're an indigenous group or you're a property owner or you are, archaeological nerds or local governments. All these different groups are impacted. And
it either does too much or too little, depending on your point of view on it. So it was always going to be a contentious one. And
well, I think even from the indigenous side, it doesn't involve them. And so they're, I guess, in a too little way, but they're eager to be involved. And the proposals seem like they will streamline that even, in making sure that it's not this weird situation where they are dictating your property to you, but there's at least some ability to work together to solve things. The downside of this is it still leaves property owners on the hook for cultural costs, for the cost of the archaeological issue. And this is something I think we both agreed on, that this is a collective value, right? History doesn't belong to whoever owns that piece of land. It belongs to all of us. Therefore, we could all pay for it. And that seems, but the government doesn't want to do that. So they're just trying to make the fees a little bit less.
And yeah, things a little less onerous on some of it. So specifically, the things they're striking out of this from the original version that they'd introduced earlier is they're taking out the proposal regarding heritage management zones, language related to consent seeking on permitting decisions, clarifying how First Nations perspectives will be incorporated in, taking out the proposed changes to enable delegation of compliance and enforcement authority to First Nations, as well as the proposals regarding defining intangible heritage. And instead, they're going to rely on the existing language in the current act for that.
So we'll see how the reaction to this is and when the bill eventually drops.
I imagine it'll still be somewhat controversial, particularly kind of like we were talking about in the previous segment, how some of the reconciliation and DRIPA stuff is facing more, to put politely, more scrutiny from the opposition than it has before.
Oh, going back to the BC Conservative leadership race, it reminds me that I dipped my toe mistakenly into Twitter this past week and saw people trying to rake Peter Millibar for, in the past, tweeting support for reconciliation or his grief over the unmarked graves at Tecumloop's residential school. And then I think it was Paul Ratchford, who I think went to 1BC. Did he go there, or is he just like...
he was there at a point. He's kind of bounced around a bit.
Right.
But I don't think he's particularly... I think the Conservatives weren't right enough for him.
Yeah, he posted a screenshot of a ChatGPT log saying, "Did Peter Millibar delete this tweet?" And it's like a link to his own tweet where it's got Peter Millibar's screen cap. And it's like, yes, Peter Millibar deleted that tweet. I took 32 seconds or something to figure that out. And I Googled it and I went through because I know how to use Twitter history. And it took me about 30 seconds to find the fucking tweet. So that's the state of Twitter discourse, is people are using ChatGPT to get lied to and posting it to try to smear their opponents for being pro-reconciliation at one point in their history. So glad I'm not on that website. What a bad place. Let's go to the federal government, the other bad place, where we have a new elections bill. This is the Strong and Free Elections Act that just got introduced today. Mark Carney is finally going to address a lot of things. Holy crap, this is a big bill. On the one hand, we have the longest ballot committee that has targeted Terrebonne by-election, where Elections Canada has said we're going to have to do write-in ballots again because dozens of candidates is unwieldy and frustrates everyone but the dozens of candidates on there, minus the ones most likely to get elected. And we also have all of the foreign interference stuff to deal with that's been outstanding for 3 years. Remember that, Scott? We used to care about that.
Yeah, I remember that. We should be caring about it more, but, good that we're finally doing some of the stuff on it. It's only been like 3 years.
It takes time to change the election.
It shouldn't.
No.
It should take some time because legislation is not simple and some of the stuff needs to be worked out ahead of time, but that should be a couple months at most thing, not a couple years, particularly when foreign interference is a problem and it's only going to continue to be a bigger problem going forward.
Yeah, I feel like Trudeau had an election amendment bill. I don't think it was this thorough, and it definitely got bogged down like everything did in those days. But this one, let's start with the longest ballot committee. They're doing two things to foil their future plans. One is, what's been talked about a lot, is limiting every agent to only working for one candidate. So one of the reasons the longest ballot committee can do what it does is because all 10, 20, 40 of these people have the same person running their campaign and responsible for that campaign. If they all had to find their own agents, suddenly it gets a lot harder to do your paperwork.
Yeah, so basically the way it works is that each campaign needs an official agent, basically the person responsible for doing the paperwork, opening the campaign account, making sure the money is spent the proper way. They're responsible for the finances and the filings and all that stuff. And before now, there were just really not a lot of limits on who to be. There were a few. You couldn't be an elections officer and be a official agent, that kind of thing. But there wasn't a lot of restrictions outside of some of those basic eligibility. And there's no limit on you could only be an official agent for one candidate in the same riding, which I guess they didn't think they needed to put in there. But now that particular provision has been abused somewhat, they are adding that in, which makes sense, because there's something kind of undemocratic about in a single riding where you're supposed to be offering the voters a choice between competing candidates with different visions who will do different things if elected the representative, that instead you're going to just have a bunch of them effectively colluding together and acting in concert with each other, which denies the voters the chance to make a truly independent decision about which way they want to go.
I mean, in most cases, it would be self-defeating to some extent, because you'd be essentially running against your own team, unless you were doing something like running Jim Green against James Green, allegedly, to confuse voters. But I think this change is fine. The other change they're doing is they are limiting you and me and every Canadian to only signing one nomination paper in your riding. So I know a few people who are super generous, and any candidate who wants to run in their riding, they will sign those nomination papers. 99.9% of Canadians have probably never signed nomination papers, but now you can only sign for one candidate. This is actually already the case in British Columbia, which neither of us knew, but it's fine. It's probably a tiny bit more controversial, but it's not the biggest infringement of anything.
No, BC is still a democracy despite that rule. And yeah, it's fine. You only need, 100 signatures anyway. It shouldn't be that hard to find 100 separate people to sign a form. And yeah, it's one of those just basic viability checks that, I don't mind having a signature. They wanted to make it 250. I wouldn't have a problem either.
No.
On that at all. So yeah, it'll be a little more controversial. I mean, anytime you do something to make it just a little bit harder to get on the ballot, some people understandably object, but this is all so small ball stuff that anyone who has even an outside chance of being able to get elected and represent the riding will be able to clear that hurdle. It's only really going to be a challenge for activist types like the Longest Ballot Committee when they need to get 200 nominations through, and it becomes a lot easier there to simply get 100 people to sign each of those forms than to find an independent person for each of those. That starts to get logistically pretty challenging.
They have not made it so you have to have some connection to the constituency, because that would harm all of the existing parties. One of the reasons the Longest Ballot Committee works the way it does is because they have volunteers across the country who are like, yeah, I'll put my name on that. It sounds funny.
And so it's the same people. Signers, I believe, have to be from the riding.
Yeah, but so they just need one volunteer who ran around and collected those signatures for all the candidates, but now it's much harder for them.
Yeah, somewhat related to that, circling back to the official agent thing, specifically it's prohibiting being the official agent for multiple candidates in the same district, so parties can still share some of that responsibility across the party, have an official agent that covers, say, 3 or 4 adjacent ridings and just handles all of that. It just avoids it where it's the same riding and you have, in theory, competing candidates sharing an official agent.
The rest of the bill covers a lot of different things. So there's lots of new prohibitions around foreign interference, accepting or offering bribes, using computers without proper authorization, publishing false or misleading information, respecting elections, and the candidate nomination process. So it kind of expands the temporal prohibitions on that and creates, I think, a few new prohibitions.
Leadership
also,
contests get
getting
wrapped into a lot of these stuff. So some of the free-for-alls on that nomination contests are not as regulated as some people would have liked, but the election crimes are now also going to be applied to nomination contests and leadership contests. And those were highlighted in the Haute Commission report as some of the areas that had the least protections and were the most vulnerable to foreign interference. Yeah,
we had some prominent allegations around like liberal nomination races, or even the federal conservative leadership race had allegations, I'm vaguely remembering, around it. And so tightening all that up to have consistent rules seems fine.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily want Elections Canada to go fully in charge of all of these and have the same rules on exactly how this has to be run be consistent for us. I think there's a spot for parties to kind of choose their own process in a lot of ways, but extending some of the obvious malfeasance to also be prohibited in these cases, I think it's a good step.
They're going to regulate and prohibit cryptocurrency as a donation, as well as some other ways of anonymously donating to candidates, which all seems reasonable. And we are getting new privacy requirements for political parties, which is good because one of their other bills is just taking political parties out of BC's privacy law. And so at least they're doing something. Like, a lot of this is hyper technical stuff where on first glance, it looks pretty good. Like, I don't see any obvious red flags here, but I'll wait, in bated breath for some smarter or more dedicated people to review this before I make a strong judgment. I'm sure this is the kind of bill that will really benefit from a hopefully sincere committee and Senate review where all parties can get on board for it. Because it's ideally we all parties should want to improve our elections.
I think I did see something in there that the electors list is not going to be as widely distributed as it would be before. It's now just going to be distributed to, what was the term in there? It was like
I think registered parties.
Registered parties. So if you're an independent running, you may be at an information disadvantage.
I was wondering about that. I saw that CBC had a good description of all the things, but like I said, it's a pretty long bill. I don't know what the current rules are. As well.
Yeah, my recollection might be a little out of date on this one, but it used to be, I believe, when you cleared like your deposits, and it might have been after the nomination deadline closed, or it might be after all the deposits, but basically you file what you have to, you pay what you have to, and you just got a list sent to you of all the registered electors in the riding and their information. And now it's going to be a little more tightly focused on that. So yeah, I could see that potentially being something that gets flagged. Not that a parliament that I don't think there's anyone that was elected as an independent.
Not this time.
Yeah. We have one or two that are sitting as an independent, don't we? Or I think your last one. Either way, we don't have anyone that's necessarily going to be making a fuss out of that on behalf of the independents. But I could see some advocacy groups pointing out that one.
There's no current independents. There's 3 vacancies.
Yeah.
The one Edmonton, Matt Genero, conservative, was talking about being independent and then just became liberal.
Yeah, they're also circling back to contents of this. They're significantly boosting the fines Elections Canada can impose as well under this.
That's good, because they were kind of a joke for a long time.
Yeah, I looked at what the amount was before, and it was shockingly low. used to be that the maximum penalty for an individual was $1,500. It's now $25,000 if this passes. And the real wild one was the organization's maximum fine was $5,000, which, when parties are raising millions of dollars a quarter, that doesn't feel like a lot of disincentive. It's now
but that would also apply to third parties and advertising rules, Scott.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
That's a very easy to pay fine, as opposed to not trying to influence an election illegally.
Yeah. 100,000 gets to be where it can sting on that. So yeah, like you said, this thing was just released today on it, so we've not had a chance to really dig into it, but from what I see, I liked what's in there so far, and I think they're all pretty good changes to how elections are run.
Will they be strong and free remains to be seen. Next up, the Auditor General. We like it when they release reports because it's easy content. We have 3 new reports on immigration, the Phoenix pay system, and the RCMP's ability to recruit people. And the answer to each of those, like most Auditor General reports, is room for improvement or more.
Yeah, the immigration one definitely hits on the or more. That one was bad. The Phoenix pay one is more, well, we're in a mess here and we're trying to climb out of it, and same thing with the RCMP one. So a lot about what could be improved on, but not wow, everyone really screwed this one up and we're now just kind of finding out about it, which is what the Auditor General's report into IRCC's international student permits was. So that's the one that's been getting most of the attention this week. The headline out of that is that more than 149,000 cases between, was it 2022 and 2023? Let me pull that up. Just
2023 and 2024.
Yeah, so over a 2-year period, there were 149,000 cases that got flagged as potential non-compliance with the terms of a study permit. So the person got the permit and wasn't actually studying, or was working more hours than the permit authorizes, or a bunch of potential issues with basically breaking the terms of their visa. Turns out they only bothered investigating about 4,000 of those because
2,000.
Oh, yeah. They had the funds to.
Yeah, they identified 153,000 students, and they had the cash to investigate 2,000 per year. So I guess 4,000 over the 2 years.
Yeah, and in addition to that, so most of them did not get investigated. They also just, when the person who was the subject of the investigation stopped responding, IRCC kind of seemed to stop working on it at that point. So those just...
Scott, that was only 40% of cases. 1,600 of 4,000.
Of the ones that actually made it there, just the bulk of these never got worked on at all. Additionally, the Auditor General identified 800 cases of identified fraud that were where the person who, when they applied for it, either lied on the form or included fraudulent documents, listed previous academic experience from institutions that just did not exist, and these were just never followed up on, as well as they did not, or they followed what was quoted as a light touch approach when processing renewals and extensions, and basically didn't really care all that much if the extensions were compliant with the government policy on this. So overall, the impression that this leaves from all of this is that immigration, refugees, and Canadian citizenship really, or Citizenship Canada, really just failed to ensure that the student study, the international student program, was working the way it should. It wasn't full of integrity issues, fraud, non-compliance, all of that.
Yeah, at the gross level, they note, or the large, overall level, they note between 2019 and 2023, applications for study permits increased by 121%. And then the government announced their limit on applications. But what actually happened is fewer applications and lower than projected approval rates led to a sharper decline than forecast. So they were expecting 255,000 new study permits and got 50,000 in 2025. And the department did not know why approval rates were lower than projected. So they can neither manage when they are getting applications, nor when they are, or know why they are not. So that's the status of the student program.
Yeah, huge mess. And this is a real black mark for the government. There's been a lot of talk in the last few years about the declining support for immigration in Canada and kind of the shattering of what was, until that point, a very unique pro-immigration consensus that kind of Canada stood away from other countries on having one that was as wide and as strong as that, and that is largely evaporated in the past couple of years. And just looking at this, like, you're kind of left wondering, or you're kind of left with the sense that if the Liberals were trying to undermine confidence in the immigration system in Canada, I don't know if they could have done a better job than what they did through some combination of apathy and negligence on this one. Like, it's bad, and this is going to be the sort of thing that gets pointed to a lot going forward.
It definitely played right into the, growing far right's desire to demonize immigration across the world and allowed them to play it up effectively for the worse for the country.
Yeah, and ultimately, these sorts of systems that rely on public support through government and through policies and laws and stuff, you need to maintain confidence in the system, that it is working as intended, that there aren't widespread fraud or noncompliance with the terms of it. And that just didn't seem to be a concern here. And if you want to rebuild that, you do have to get to the point where there is an understanding and a sense that what the system is intended to do is what it is actually doing, and that nobody is taking advantage to it, and certainly not at scale. And there's a lot of work to be done on this. And I don't know, this is the sort of thing that once upon a time in Canada would have probably resulted in a minister resigning or getting booted from cabinet, and yet you don't see any sign of that now. And that's, I think, also part of the disappointing breakdown in accountability in Canada, that something that's this big of a screw up doesn't really get beyond opposition politicians yelling at the government and clips circulating on social media. But the government ought to do something that actually indicates they've accepted responsibility and there's going to be some accountability on it.
Well, in other giant screw-ups is the Phoenix pay system, where the Auditor General is looking at their move to the new Dayforce system. And I guess the good news here is that while they're still in the planning phases, they are essentially on track. They're estimating they're going to be accurate, on time, and the project will provide value for money once implemented. Now, the flip side is there are still 233,000 outstanding pay transactions to be fixed, impacting 133,000 people. And if this backlog isn't cleared, there's a risk it carries over and fucks up the new system.
Yeah, you know the whole saying of garbage in, garbage out. Well, it turns out if you put a lot of garbage into the new system, you're probably going to get some garbage out on that one. So there's a lot of work to do before that in clearing this backlog.
We also know that Public Service and Procurement Canada has a preliminary estimate for Dayforce at $4.2 billion, which does not include important costs needed for all departments and agencies to transition. And Public Service and Procurement Canada is still determining how it will measure the cost savings the new system will achieve.
Which is just a wild amount of money. So, for context, depending on whether or not you count the various agencies that are kind of a little bit of an arm's length from the government, and I don't actually, off the top of my head, know whether or not they're on Phoenix or in their own payroll system. There's somewhere between basically 280,000 to 357,000 public servants in Canada, all of which means we're talking a 5-figure amount of money per person being paid with this to move over to the new system, which is a lot.
The final report is RCMP recruitment, which is not going well. Is the headline there. We are not recruiting. The RCMP is not recruiting enough people, and according to the Auditor General, is not even trying to recruit enough people.
Seems like they really should be trying to recruit enough people.
If you have a plan to do a certain job, you should have plans to do that job.
This has been a long-standing issue, and it's been one that has been affecting the RCMP's ability to actually deliver services. I know we've talked a bunch before about the strain the RCMP's under doing both contract policing and the complicated national security and financial traps and all those sorts of things. Trying to do both of those. Being real short-staffed makes it hard to do either one of those effectively, and both are suffering as a result.
The funniest thing in here is apparently they actually made some changes to recruitment in 2023 that allowed new officers to choose where they could go for their first assignment as long as there was a vacancy. And that worked great. They had 6,000 more applications than in the previous year and surpassed their planned application numbers. However, there was this unintended consequence of chronic vacancies in, I believe, other divisions that increased. And it got so bad that they had to reverse course in July 2025.
Yeah, they don't exactly say where it is, but from the reading between the lines on this, as well as looking at their chart of what the vacancies are, it sure seems like the issue was that turns out when you offer people the choice, a lot of people will say, pick British Columbia over Nunavut. And you have, in the north, the Yukon's actually not bad, but just looking at the contract policing vacancies number, the Nunavut and Northwest Territories are both about like 22-23% on there. Manitoba's not exactly doing great at 17.5%. So it may have been great for filling the vacancies on the spots people wanted to go, but it sure left a chronic understaffing issues on the less glamorous postings.
And apparently this will take, quote, many years to fully reverse the impacts of the temporary approach. So not only did this go bad, it made things worse.
Yeah, I suppose what they're trying to avoid doing is just yanking a huge number of officers out of the comparatively well-staffed or the less short-staffed ones to redistribute them, because that would also be very disruptive. But yeah, it does mean there's going to be a fairly long-term trouble fixing this. It's going to last a while. So, lot to sort out here.
Maybe we should just disband the RCMP and go back to provincial policing, or at least stop having RCMP do like roadside checks in rural Alberta and everywhere else.
Well, I think the thing
I
is,
just don't like the agency.
Yeah, what's the problem here is that ultimately it's an agency that has grown up from one specific role and just continually had to fill them and expand them, and it hasn't always worked right. Before CSIS came around, the RCMP was also the ones doing intelligence work to a certain degree and securities work. So there's just a lot of stuff where it's kind of a bit of a Frankenstein. We've tapped stuff on here and there, and I don't necessarily think going with the US is dozens upon dozens of 3-letter agencies that you have trouble keeping track of is necessarily the best approach either, but it would be good to kind of break some of this stuff out. The recently announced, and I believe they just announced that it was opening this year, if I remember. But there's a new financial crimes agency that they're standing up, so breaking some of that out's good. But yeah, really, we should have kind of an FBI type thing that deals with, serious crimes of national importance or complex investigative work. And we should have a different agency that does the, road stops in Vanderhoof. And until we break those two apart, it's always going to be a mess.
And that has been Politicoast. Find links to everything we talked about at politicoast.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicoast. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicoast is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.